Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome everybody to Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo, and it's great to be with you today on this sunny Tuesday, and got a great show in store for you today. We're going to be going deep into history, and actually we're going to talk about the East-West Schism, you know, where the East and West separated, and it's funny because scholars aren't really sure exactly where to draw the line of where the schism actually takes place and when it takes place. Certainly one of the first breaks occurred with a bishop named Photius, and his schism ultimately led to the great schism between East and West. And by the way, that's what spawned today, where we have Catholicism in the West, and you have Orthodoxy in the East. And so that is a long, complicated issue. However, we are so grateful because we're going to have our good friend Erick Ybarra on the show. Erick, as you know, is with reasonandtheology.com. He also does a lot of writing himself, and he is a veritable encyclopedia when it comes to these issues. And not only that, but he's also incredibly articulate, and he can really condense a lot of data down very simply and easily to understand. So we're going to look at, what caused this momentous split in the church, and what we can learn about it, so that if we're talking to Orthodox, or perhaps if you're a DRE or you run apologetics class or something and somebody asks you about it, listen to this program, and Erick will fill you up with all sorts of great info on that split. He'll be coming up on the other side of the break, folks. Also, as always, we do our critical thinking skills. Today's Finding the Fallacy is the faulty generalization fallacy. And we also meet an early church father. Today's early church father is, I think, fairly well known, but perhaps not as well known as someone like St. Augustine or St. Jerome. It's St. Andrew of Crete. So we got a lot in store for us today. As always, I want to start off the show with getting off on the right foot, and that is by giving my shout-out, my hat tip, my yoo-hoos, my congrats, my welcomes to all of you watching live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and other platforms that we live stream on. Welcome aboard, folks. Hello. As I turn my attention over to the social media section of the dojo. And also I want to welcome all of you listening on radio around the country and also around the world via podcast. That just continuously blows my mind that there's people over the oceans around the world that are listening to the show, and it's so humbling. And we also very much appreciate that you're on board, folks. So I want to welcome all of you. Some of you may be newbies, and you might be thinking, podcast, I thought this was a live radio show. Well, guess what? You can access this program via the internet at our flagship website, which is virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Or if you're lucky enough to have our handy-dandy phone app, which, by the way, is available for free, you can also access our shows through that. And, that's a great way you can evangelize. Every show I'm reminding you, because we need to utilize whatever opportunities the Lord gives us. And actually, the COVID crisis is an opportunity, is that you can do apologetics and evangelism, maybe not face-to-face. Maybe you can't go to large conferences and things like that. But nevertheless, we can share and defend the faith from the comfort of our own home. And in fact, it's incredibly easy. And just a real simple way to do that is subscribe. If you like Hands-On Apologetics or any of the other shows, subscribe, because that helps increase our visibility. Also, tell people about programs. Maybe you know somebody who's flirting with orthodoxy, or maybe you know someone who's an Orthodox that really doesn't understand the history of what separates us. This would be a great show to share with them. So, share with friends, tell friends, like, subscribe, do all the social media type thingies you do, and we can help spread the word and also help equip people to have a good, sound foundation from which they can explain, defend, and share the faith with, as we say here, with clarity, charity, and confidence. And that's what the dojo's all about, folks. That's our workout routine we do every day, at least every weekday. I still do it on weekends, by the way, just in the privacy of my own home. So anyway, let's jump to the finding the fallacy, shall we? The finding the fallacy today is the faulty generalization fallacy. And, this one I have to confess my own ignorance on, because as I read the different definitions of faulty generalization and hasty generalization, I have a feeling that they're probably just two names for the same thing. I think the hasty generalizations where you jump to a conclusion based on insufficient evidence. Faulty generalization, there may be some nuance I'm missing, but here's the definition. In logic and reasoning, a faulty generalization, similar to a proof by example in mathematics, is a conclusion made about all or many instances of a phenomenon that has been reached on the basis of one or a few instances of the phenomenon. Okay, so you don't get the jumping, hasty type thing, but nevertheless, it's both that you have inadequate amount of evidence in order to make a general conclusion. That's basically what a faulty generalization is. For example, if you travel to a foreign country and the persons you meet are rude, you might conclude that everybody in the country is rude because of that few sample that you met, which of course would be a faulty generalization, right? Because it's just an inadequate size sample to draw such a broad conclusion. So we'll just leave it at that. That's the faulty generalization fallacy. And let's jump to the Meet the Early Church Father for today, who is St. Andrew of Crete, who was born around 660 and died around AD 740. St. Andrew of Crete is also called Andrew of Jerusalem. He is reckoned as one of the principal composers of hymns in the Eastern Church. He was born in Damascus about the year AD 660. He became a monk in Jerusalem at the Monastery of the Holy Sepulchre at the age of 14 or 15. He was ordained a deacon in Constantinople in 685. And about the year 692 AD, he was made archbishop of a city in Crete, hence the name Andrew of Crete. At the Monothelite Synod in Constantinople in 712, he subscribed to the Monothelite repudiation of the two wills of Christ. Remember, we've talked about that, how Christ, because it's two natures, divine and human, he has two wills, a divine will and a human will. Although the latter doctrine had been defined by the Third Council, that's the Sixth Ecumenical Council of Constantinople in 680. He retracted and presented to the Archdeacon Agathon of Constantinople a profession of faith against Nestorianism, Monophysitism, and Monothelism. So the trifecta there. What are these heresies? Well, they're all Christological heresies. They all have to do with Jesus. Nestorian, in a sense, posited that Jesus is kind of two persons, I guess if you want to really simplify it. Monophysitism said that Jesus only had one nature, a kind of combination of divine and human nature. And monothelism was that Christ only had one will, not a divine and a human will. So Andrew of Crete, realizing his error, professes the faith against these three heresies. In his later years, he was much engaged in the struggle against iconoclasm and the iconoclastic emperor Leo the Assyrian, who reigned from 717 to 741. By the way, iconoclasm, that's a word we don't really use a lot today, but that's really the heresy against the religious use of images. Okay. And, of course, Emperor Leo the Assyrian was influenced by Islam. He tried to kind of buddy up to Islam, who also that Islam is iconoclastic. That's why if you ever see a picture of a mosque, you won't see pictures of Muhammad or anything like that. It'll be geometric forms or something like that. So he was he was an apologist against this iconoclasm. Andrew died on July 4th, 740. I should have had him for the July 4th show. Silly me. Among his literary remains are a substantial number of homilies and sermons. Most of them are judged authentic. And he's probably best remembered, however, for his numerous metrical compositions in the nature of hymns. So, for example, in his canons on the Nativity of the Blessed Mother, he has a couple of things that's very interesting to say. He says, "Today, O Savior, you have given to pious Anne, fruitful offspring of her womb, your immaculate mother." That's in Ode 4. Also in Ode 5, he says, "O Virgin undefiled, undefiled is your birth." So again, both of these point to Mary, possibly Immaculate Conception, but at least it points to her subsequent sinlessness, and certainly she was highly honored by St. Andrew of Crete. And that's our early church father for today, St. Andrew of Crete, from 660 to 740. And, actually, this was a good early church father to have on this day. God has been very providential with the Meet the Early Father segments. They've been matching up very nicely with our topics, because coming up on the other side of the break, we're going to have our good friend Erick Ybarra come on. We're going to talk about Photius and the East-West Schism. So stay tuned, folks. You're listening to Hands on Apologetics. We will be right back.
Hebrews 11:3 says, "By faith we come to understand." According to St. Augustine, understanding is the reward of faith. Therefore, seek not to understand that you may believe, but believe that you may understand. May God grant us a strong living faith in Him and His divine plan of salvation, and help us to believe so that we may understand.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby?
She is? Will it be a boy?
Or will it be a girl? We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special.
You mean like being a president?
Or maybe a doctor. Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Mary Ann Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-Life Across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands on Apologetics. And our topic today, we're going to talk about probably the first major schism within the church in church history, the separation of East and West. And as I mentioned before, scholars are very reticent to try to pick an exact date when this break occurred. In fact, they believe there may be several breaks. And specifically, we're going to talk about the role of Photius and the East-West Schism. And to help us do that, we have our good friend Erick Ybarra. You're all familiar with Erick's work on reasonandtheology.com. He's done a tremendous amount of work in the field of apologetics in terms of the papacy and the history of the papacy. He's been on the show several times, and you could check out he has great articles and other material at his website, which is erickybarra.org. And Erick, welcome back to Hands on Apologetics.
Oh, thank you, Gary, for having me back. Just want to make sure my volume's working here.
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Thank
Richard,
you
how's it sound?
back.
Yeah, and this is a great topic for you because I know that, the papacy's always interested you, but also the papacy in regards to orthodoxy and apologetics between Orthodox and Catholics.
Yeah, absolutely. When I had left the Anglican Communion to become Catholic, I was fortunate enough to know a number of scholar-type Anglicans, and so they were very well versed in church history, and so the claims of the East, the Eastern churches, was not forgotten, especially because Anglicans used to use the Eastern churches as a proof that the papacy wasn't necessary. It was more prevalent in Anglican circles than in the more mainstream Reformed Protestant or Presbyterian circles, because for them, before Rome, there's just Rome. But for the Anglicans, the consciousness of the East is more prevalent because it serves as an apologetic for their separation from Rome. Because if East was able to get out of it, then we're the Orthodox of the West, is how some of the Anglicans used to call themselves. So it has always deeply interested me, and I never put the study down, even up until this very point.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and there's so much too. I feel like I could spend a lifetime reading books and still just scratch the surface of everything that's going on. So you mentioned with Anglicans, do Anglicans still have this idea of a branch theory, that in a sense they're just another branch like the Orthodox and the Roman?
Yes, they do. Of course, there's been several introductions of new ecclesiologies in the Anglican communions, and I have to say communions plural because they're not all in communion with each other. I was part of the Anglican Province of America on the Northeast under Bishop Grundorf, a wonderful man, convert from Pentecostalism. And so our communion was not in communion with the other more liberal Anglican communions that you have there. And of course, there's issues with the Canterbury Center, because ever since the 70s, there's been a welcoming of certain deviances, more liberal deviances that other Anglicans were not going to tolerate. So they do hold to a branch theory in the sense that the valid priesthood of Christ exists in the Eastern churches, in Roman Catholicism, and in the Church of England. Apostolic succession, that principle of orders, still, they still make that claim, and they would admit that it's not pertinent to the other Protestants who forsook the whole idea of apostolic succession and holy orders. So they do hold to the branch theory, and they don't think it's ideal. Of course, that's one of the mistakes that some people get. That's not their ideal. Their ideal would be that there would be only one trunk, one tree, but unfortunately, due to schism, they have to they had to modify their understanding of the unity of the church.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very good. And speaking of schism, we jump to the 9th century. Let's talk a little bit about Photius, because I don't think, for the average Catholic, they ever heard of a Photius.
Yeah, he's up until, I want to say, up until about 100 years ago, Photius was bad news bear for Roman Catholic scholars and historians. One of the most famous historians who wrote about Photius was a German academic. And he was and he was a priest, Joseph Hergenrother. I'm sure I can't get the German accent, but he wrote about Photius's life, and his German account of Photius took the standard in academia for a long time, which painted Photius in a less than good light. Sort of like, I think of Father Adrian Fortescue, who was an English priest also engaged in the East-West dialogue and debate, and he referred to Photius as the Martin Luther of the Eastern Church. And so that was the idea up until a famous French priest, Father Francis Dvornik, came onto the scene and engaged in Photian studies, and going back through the disputed texts and the documentary corpus of that 9th century dispute, he was able to show that the most reliable documents actually show that he wasn't as bad as we've typically seen him to be. Now, not every scholar has agreed with this revolution in historical studies, because it is nothing short of a revolution that Dvornik brought to the scene. There's I know Father Grumel, Grumel, is another. I want to say he was German. He had a review of Dvornik that he didn't agree with all of what Dvornik says, but we could safely say that today most of modern scholarship on this issue carries the Dvornik line. Okay. Which means that there was a big dispute, there were problems, but that Photius, in all likelihood, did die in the peace of the church, in communion with the Pope.
Interesting. Yeah, so there's been a kind of title change in the way, at least from the West, how we viewed him. Was Photius always held highly in the East?
No, and so that kind of goes into the dispute that we've had, that in the 9th century over the whole issue. If you'd like, I will jump right into the narrative, and that kind of that'll explain the Eastern view of Photius as well. Would you like me to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So we're right off the heels of iconoclasm supposedly closing its book in 787. They had the Seventh Council of Nicaea. The Seventh Council, which was held at Nicaea in 787. But iconoclasm resurrected around 813, and so you still had a division in the East, particularly in Constantinople, with this issue of the licety of venerating images. And you had one of the last iconoclastic emperors who died, and I can't remember his name right now, but more importantly, his wife, Theodora, who basically succeeded him in the regency because his son was Michael III, was too young to run the empire. So Theodora liked veneration of images, and so in 843, all the Orthodox in the world today know about this date. It's called the Triumph of Orthodoxy, where the sacred images were brought back into the open, and they were allowed in the East. But you still had two different camps. You had the moderate camp, and then you had the radical venerating icon camp. The moderate camp are those who they liked, they thought it was permissible, but they weren't going to be as disciplinary with people who were against it. The more radical camp were the monastics, and the famous monasteries then were the monasteries of Studium. That's where we get Saint Theodore the Studite, and his relatives and some of his spiritual progeny continued the pro-icon legacy. But there was a division in Constantinople, and this brings us into the whole issue with Photius, because Theodora wanted to bring order to the Patriarchate of Constantinople, and so she managed to find a successor to the throne of Constantinople, the bishopric, following Patriarch Methodius, a certain Ignatius. And Ignatius took the office of the Patriarchate of Constantinople, and he represents the more monastic point of view. And this was, not pleasing to everybody. So there was already an issue with his election, Meanwhile, Theodora is, holding the regency, but Michael III, her son, gets old enough to reign, or to participate more in the government of the empire, and somebody takes her place, his uncle named Bardas, and so now you have Uncle Bardas kind of holding more of the regency role, and then you've got Michael III, who's growing up, getting old enough to kind of partner with him, and so they're kind of both in the leadership position there. And Uncle Bardas was a particularly scandalous man. And, Michael III, the emperor, I'm very hesitant with following all the narratives of history on the gross life of emperors and popes and bishops.
Yeah.
But he did get the name Michael the Drunkard for a reason.
Wonder what that could be.
Yeah. God forgive me if the facts are completely opposite, but the tales of history all converge on that. And so there was a day where Uncle Bardas, who had become known to be a sexually immoral man, particularly with his daughter, his niece.
Oh, actually, Eric, hold it right there. I hear the music coming up, and we'll just pick up on the other side of break. We're chatting with Erick Ybarra about Photius and East-West Schism. Stay tuned, folks.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR, live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And here's an easy way to support us by going to smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center or Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And when you log in your Amazon account and you purchase products, a portion of it will go right back in supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And it doesn't cost you a dime. I want to thank you ahead of time because that supports us year-round. May God bless you and your family. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with Erick Ybarra, and unfortunately, the music came up, but it was a great cliffhanger because you were talking about Uncle Bardius. Yeah, it was somewhat immoral, and also Michael III becoming of age. So it was something of a cliffhanger. What's going to happen in regards to, this iconoclasm that recently was stomped out, and how does Photius fit into the scheme?
Yeah, so Bardius, it became talk in Constantinople about his irregular relationship and out of marriage. And he went to receive communion on it was a feast day, and he went to go receive communion, and Ignatius, the patriarch, denied him Holy Communion. And so this, along with other issues and complaints about Ignatius, his election, his views, caused Michael III, with a number of supporters, to enforce the abdication of Ignatius. Now, as you can tell, there's already going to be two camps here. There were those who would rise up to the defense of Ignatius, and then there were those who were going to rise up to the defense of the new program, which was to bring Photius, a certain highly influential intellectual man, into the office of patriarch. And so there's a lot of writing going on, a lot of histories are being written. One side is going to paint the other side in exaggerative terms, and likewise vice versa. Mm-hmm. So the documentary evidence we have is a hodgepodge of this side saying this side did this and this side did that. There were claims that he was forced out of office and that he didn't resign willfully. Father Francis Dvornik, whose scholarship I prefer to rest on, shows that the most reliable evidence shows that he willfully abdicated under a lot of pressure. So you take that for what that's worth. Photius, the intellectual of the East, is brought into the office of patriarch. In 1 week, he is made a subdeacon all the way to bishop and then patriarch of Constantinople. So this threw up a lot of red flags.
Right.
And one of the first things on the menu was to solidify the acceptance of images in the East, because iconoclasm had been rearing its ugly head in spots around Constantinople. And so they wrote to Pope Nicholas at the time for two reasons, but really for one reason. The reason stated was so that he could send legates to Constantinople to have another ecumenical council to condemn iconoclasm. But the real reason they wrote was so that Nicholas could give the green light to Photius's election and Ignatius's abdication. Well, Pope Nicholas was a hardliner with canon law. So he's reading about this letter coming from the East about how they got Ignatius out of the office there. He willfully abdicated. And Photius, a layman, within 1 week is brought into the office of patriarch. So this is throwing up all kinds of red flags for Pope Nicholas. And so he sends a couple of legates to go back to Constantinople to investigate what's going on. This is year 861. And at the Council of 861 in Constantinople, the papal legates, not knowing any Greek, having a translator there, persuading them that the Photius side was the correct side. Ignatius willfully abdicated. Everything's fine. Everything was done according to canon law. So the legates come back, and Pope Nicholas is not buying it. He's not buying it. There's something too fishy about this. And then he gets other communication from the East about what really happened. So, and those messengers were pro-Ignatian messengers. So they're the ones accusing Michael III and Uncle Bartus and Photius for usurping the abdication of Ignatius and bringing Photius into office. So Pope Nicholas decides that he's not going to recognize Photius and that he's going to recognize Ignatius as still the valid patriarch.
Okay.
Well, that caused a lot of problems in the East because now the Pope of Rome does not accept Patriarch Photius. And so this caused quite a bit of a rift. And not only did it lead to the non-recognition of Photius, but Pope Nicholas ended up excommunicating Photius. And this caused a rift because Emperor Michael III, Photius was his man. And so this caused a schism between Rome and Constantinople. And Photius is in office, and they were going to continue on with that division until a certain man named Basil came in and had Uncle Bartus assassinated, and later on had Michael III assassinated, and he became the emperor of the Eastern Byzantine Empire. This started the Macedonian dynasty. So Basil's the first. And he's not a fan of Photius. So he takes Photius out of office. By the way, if the listeners don't know, Constantinople is where the emperor was. So the patriarch was kind of under the thumb, you could say, of the emperor in many cases. So Basil, wanting Rome to be back in communion with Constantinople, brought Ignatius from the shadows back into patriarchal office and exiled Photius. And there were letters written to Rome so that we could rectify the division. And that's when Pope Nicholas, who had just recently passed away, Pope Hadrian I, taking his place, sends another pair of legates to Constantinople at the Ecumenical Council, which for us is ecumenical, the Ecumenical Council of Constantinople 869.
Okay.
And at that council, the whole program was to put the condemnation of Photius into the books written in stone, to confirm the validity of Ignatius, and also to clean off some of the dirt and tighten some of the loose screws with how things should be done in the East. Photius had tried to excommunicate Pope Nicholas. So one of the decrees of that council was that you can't just judge a pope. That's Canon 21 of that council. And they called him the new Dioscorus, who was from the 5th century and tried to excommunicate Pope Leo. So Photius came under a dark cloud at this council, and the Eastern bishops signed the Formula of Hormisdas again. The Formula of Hormisdas was kind of it was a set treaty that anytime there was division between Rome and another church, Rome would send them that treaty and add names to it. So, they added Photius's name to it in terms of a condemnation. And so it looked like it was a successful council, but the Eastern bishops were hesitant because they really didn't think that the Pope and his legates understood what was going on. And it came out to be quite true, because after the Council of 869 to 870, there was no more peace in Constantinople over this issue. And there was the party that defended Photius was so loud and strong, and their case became to be convincing, so much so that Emperor Basil writes back to Rome, basically with news that Photius is back in office. But it's not as though there was a rift again between Photius and Ignatius. In fact, what ends up happening is Ignatius is on his deathbed, and Photius reconciles with him.
Okay.
And so whatever stories were, whatever information was not known to Rome before over the goings on in Constantinople, the two factions come to peace in Constantinople, and everybody's in support of Photius coming back into office.
Okay.
And but you still have an anti-Photian camp that never dies, at least for a long time. But their voice definitely shrinks. So another council is called in 879. This time with not Pope Hadrian, but with Pope John VIII. And Pope John VIII is willing to go along with Photius's rehabilitation on certain conditions. Those conditions being that he recognizes that what he did was wrong, his behavior was not right. Whatever the story was, and how Ignatius may have been in the wrong or Photius may have been in the right, whatever happened, what Photius did was not perfect. It was there was something wrong about it, and so the Pope wanted him to apologize. And the Pope also wanted the Emperor to return certain jurisdictions that were taken away from the iconoclastic emperors going back to the 8th century. This is the Illyricum, later Bulgarian Bulgarian territory, which belonged to Rome all the way up until for 600 years, and the iconoclastic emperor took it away. So we'll get back to that one.
Yeah, very good. We're chatting with Erick Ybarra about Photius and the East-West Schism. Stay tuned, folks. More to come on the other side of the break.
Help the Helpless, a Minnesota St. Paul nonprofit organization chaired by Father of Tyr and volunteers, is humbly asking you for your kind support to help the poor and the handicapped children in India and Ecuador. Through financial support from the Help of the Helpless benefactors, the children are provided with clothing, food, education, shelter, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. The mission is to help children thrive and become self-sufficient young adults leading productive lives. We also provide aid to poor families in Ecuador with food baskets, medicines, medical assistance, and help with funeral needs for the deceased. The work in India is done by Father Antonio's organization, St. Mary's. In Ecuador, the work is being done by the Servant Sisters of the Home of Mother. You can call us at 877-762-8857. To learn more, please visit our website, www.helpthehelpless.org. God bless you.
Healthcare news today seems to be coming from everywhere and everyone. It's confusing at least and untrustworthy at the worst. Dr. Aceta is a faithful Catholic in the Kern County community. He is trustworthy, well-researched, and will only give expert opinion on matters in his own specialty. Catholic teaching at its entirety is of utmost importance to Dr. Aceta. Give Dr. Aceta a call for your obstetrics and gynecological needs at 661-695-6617.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with Erick Ybarra about Photius and the East-West Schism. So the Pope gives a couple of conditions for his rehabilitation, I guess you could say, with Photius. And that is the admission that Photius had some irregularities prior to this, and also with the emperor conceding certain jurisdictions that were taken away from Rome.
Yes, yeah, that was one of the big controversies between East and West. The iconoclastic emperors wanted Rome to jump on board with the iconoclastic policy, but Pope Gregory II basically told him, that would be going against the tradition of the church, and anybody who disagrees with that is excommunicated. Well, Gregory II sent out that edict, and the Emperor Leo the Isaurian, the first iconoclastic emperor, in retaliation. Other historians think that it was for other reasons, but I stick with the historians who say that it was out of some sort of retaliation, took away some of the territories in the Illyricum Peninsula and certain places in South Italy that Rome had managed in terms of patriarchal responsibilities, and gave it over to the Bishop of Constantinople, who at the time was iconoclastic friendly.
Right.
So you had a rift there between East and West, and so that was never resolved up until this point, right? Pope John VIII is saying, look, this happened many, many, many years ago, but you guys really need to do it right and give us back those territories. Now, these territories were, some people might be listening to this and say, well, I thought the Pope had universal jurisdiction, so why does he have certain territories? Well, there's a difference between the Pope's universal jurisdiction at this point and his patriarchal responsibilities. With patriarchal responsibilities, he had direct oversight over the election of bishops in those territories. Well, the Pope had nothing to do with the election of bishops in Asia or in Alexandria or in Syria. So his jurisdiction in that sense didn't go to the whole globe. So he had a wide jurisdiction of patriarchal responsibilities, and the iconoclastic emperors took part of it away. So these are the conditions that Pope John VIII sends to Constantinople in order for Rome to be okay with Photius back in office at the Council of 879 in Constantinople. Well, at this council, it was a much more peaceful council. It was a much more bigger council. And the situation in Constantinople became more clear, especially to the legates, that Ignatius wasn't totally in the right, and that the replacement was actually the best thing to happen. So Ignatius complied with it, and eventually, before his death, he came to peace with it and recognized Photius. So Photius now is recognized as the patriarch, and some of the statements in the letters that the Pope sent contained explicit claims of papal authority by divine institution, that the Pope has the right to investigate in foreign affairs, The Pope has the right to restore Photius to office if he so decides. Those were left into the acta of the council, which is very interesting because at this time, the East is real testy with some of these jurisdictional claims coming from Rome. And the legates are able to get enough into the acts which preserve the authenticity and the recognition of the Roman primacy, but also furnishes very clear that Photius, despite what went on, is the true patriarch of Constantinople. The other business that took place was the filioque addition to the creed was forbidden in that council, and which is fine. That was the Roman policy then as well. Rome's policy had always been to not allow the creed to have the filioque in it. The Frankish bishops of the Carolingian program in the West, they're the ones who wanted and had the filioque in the creed. And certain missionaries went to Bulgaria from the West, and they were chanting the creed with the filioque. This is what caused the East to the first time they like, whoa, what is this filioque business? And Photius thought it was a heresy. Many in the East thought it was a heresy. But at this council, they compromised and only said that the creed should stay the way it is, the way it was made in 381. And so that was the other piece of business at that council. That's called a reunion council. So Rome and Constantinople came back into peace from that council. And this is one of the reasons why Father Francis Dvornik believes that Photius died in communion with the Pope, because he came to recognize the primacy of Rome and the proper conditions for being patriarch. Many more details there, but Photius ends up falling into problems with the successor of Emperor Basil. The new emperor that came into the second emperor in the Macedonian dynasty deposes him out of office and sends him into exile. And Photius's ending is mysterious in many ways. We don't have all the details, but from the stance of Rome, there was no second schism or another condemnation of Photius, and that's kind of the idea that went forward. That this Photius, he ended up dying out of communion with the Pope because of he rejected the papacy and all this kind of thing. But the documents closer to home show that he most likely died in the peace and communion of Rome. And but that doesn't mean that his story doesn't have the seeds that would later be watered and grow into the schism that eventually materialized between the East and the West. So certainly his condemnation of the filioque, certainly some of his complaints about Western liturgical usage, would come back to the fore with Michael Carolarius in the 11th century. So I think that while there was this very very surprising peace between Photius and Rome at the end of the 9th century, I think some of the basic material was already there that would have separated the churches. They just didn't realize how separate they were already. Yeah. And if they would have entertained those differences more at the time, I think we probably would have seen an earlier schism between East and West.
Interesting. Yeah, you can already see like the seeds with the papal legates not knowing Greek and all the communication problems, and then you have of course the emperor. It's kind of interesting how Photius's fate is really tied to the emperor. His meteoric rise and his meteoric fall, it's tied to the emperors.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that kind of relationship in the East marked the territory all the way to the fall of the Roman Empire in 1453. The patriarchs of Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, they were shrunk due to Muslim and later Turkish invasion. It really was Constantinople at the head of the East. And even at the Council of Florence, you see that the very first day they're debating on who's going to sit higher, the Pope or the Emperor. So it's very clear that in the East, the Emperor had more influence on how things were going to go than did the bishops.
Yeah, very good. Well, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the great work you're doing on reasonandtheology.com. Tell us some of the recent programs that you've had.
Oh, yeah, we've had some really great programs recently. We had Father John Ramsey, who's actually a Russian Orthodox priest, came on to discuss the doctrine of the essence and energies distinction. We've had Father Christian Kappas on to discuss the canonicity issues in Islam, some of the other canons and scriptural pedigree that of the Quran. I know that we had Dr. Ray Schumann, the famous Jewish convert to Catholicism. He wrote.
Roy Schumann. Yeah.
Roy.
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we have him. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he was fantastic. It's absolutely. We are going to have tonight a show with a Protestant who has been really thinking about Catholicism and epistemological issues. He comes a lot from canon objections, so very much deep in the thick of Protestant objections to the canon. So that's tonight. So and I'll be on tonight to discuss this with this gentleman. And we also have plans for the future. We do have Abbot Trifo. He's an Eastern Orthodox monk. He'll be coming on. He's a spiritual director for many. He's voiced on Ancient Faith Radio. And we've got several programs I can't think off the top of my head, but there's plenty of good ones coming up. Just keep us in your subscribe list and hit the bell, and you'll be notified.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's I'm an avid watcher, and like I said, just really good stuff. You guys go in depth. Not a lot of fluff. It's all meat and potatoes, and I always learn a lot with every program. So, great stuff.
We were blessed with your participation recently as well over the issue of canon and with our friend Christy from the Protestant camp. That was just very calm and keen, factual accountability.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's great stuff. So thank you so much, Eric, for coming on. We appreciate it. By the way, folks, that is reasonandtheology.com. Go to the YouTube channel, subscribe. Great show. Great show. All right. So, man, the hour's flown. But never fear, Terry and Jesse will soon be here with the Terry and Jesse Show. Thank you so much for listening. And it's time for me to shut down the Midwest Command Center, turn off the JoJo lights. And God willing, we'll be back again tomorrow with John DeRosa. We're going to talk about the problem of evil. Take care, everybody. Hope everyone has a great day. Bye-bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.